we're going to continue this conversation around scenario planning as a part of governance. And what would it mean to be, I think, I don't know what Dennis has planned, but I know some curiosity that arose last time was, what would it mean to do regenerative scenario planning? How does nature plan? Um, I, I, humans are part of nature. We plan. So maybe that's what we do. Maybe that's how nature plans. I don't know. Dennis, are you ready, or do we just?
Yeah, I didn't realize my mic wasn't on all this time.
Yeah.
So hi, everybody.
I'm gonna also put a link to the regenerative principles slide deck that we, have worked on, that's just out there for us to think about and add to. Go ahead, Dennis, I'll do that. And
Okay, I'm going to share the link so you can hop on here. I don't have any interactive stuff. We are going to, actually, maybe, we're going to watch a little video and play some poker. So it should be kind of interesting. Should talk about small bets and how they might relate. And that'll all lead into how nature deals with change. Okay, here's the...
You have to know how to play poker?
No, that I can explain that, or there's also a tutorial and stuff like that. But I'll explain what's going on. It's really more about statistics, probabilities, and math than it is about the poker game. So poker is just the mechanism in which the probability is observed. Okay. So yeah, scenario planning, nature's way. What is it? There we go. And so there's a lot of scenario planning is interesting because it opens up to systems thinking. You can't do scenario planning properly unless you're actually doing some kind of systems thinking, although there's a mechanistic way of approaching systems thinking and a natural way. Natural systems are a bit different. They're far more complex and chaotic than the typical mechanistic systems that you have that are more oriented towards complicatedness and complexity. Okay, so Darwin had something to say about all this stuff. So how does nature deal with moving from the past to a more relevant future when circumstances change, right? Not first of all, but so Darwin is definitely, he was sort of steeped in the reductionist paradigm. Reductionist science was on the rise, and he was one of the best of them. But he also had a really great eye for observation, which is a good starting point for a scientist, whether they're reductionist or not. And he had some things to say after he spent 5 years on the USS Beagle or something like that. He went famously to South America and to the Galapagos Islands and observed what was going on in a very isolated environment, I guess. So he talked about natural selection. Here's what he said. He's contrast. This is the introduction to his Origin of Species, which I actually bought the physical book because I was curious. I'd never read it, and also found it online for free through the Gutenberg project. Okay, I have links to that here. If you want to click through to that, it's here in the archive. Here's a PDF. So free Origin of Species there for you, no charge. So he talks about how natural selection is very powerful, how it can change subtle aspects of things as well as make large aspects change. I talked about how it affects all ages, both sexes, what it means to have intercrossing. And this is key, circumstances favorable and unfavorable to natural selection. So this could be something you explore in a scenario planning and something nature might be exploring too. Right?
Can we pause just a second? I'd like to read this.
Oh, sure.
Thanks, just a minute.
That's kind of what it's for. So if you want to go on the board and read at your own leisure, feel free to, there's a bunch of text on here.
Yeah, just 1 minute so I can just read this part. Okay, I don't know. That's kind of
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's really, really deep. And this is a broad summary of a text that's probably like several pages long. So I'm trying to highlight or just cherry pick the highlights of what I think points to how nature might be working. Okay. Um, Talk about compensation and economy of growth. That's another thing you'd plan for scenario planning. Um, let's see here. And the idea of variability is very interesting too. Is this laws of variation? Yeah, I think that's really relevant too. Um,
What does that mean?
Variation is a diversity. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
nature using diversity to
Mm-hmm.
increase the chances of life surviving
Mm-hmm.
in a specific region.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're talking about how things vary. He was fascinated by the fact that there were sort of really small changes made, and the fact that you have more of the same species in a smaller area creates more diversity, not less. You'd think they'd be all the same because they have the same external circumstances they're adapting to. It's not true. Yeah, and he didn't understand that. What I was fascinated by, people glibly quote Darwin on things as far as like survival of the fittest and all that. He had so many doubts and unknown things that he mentioned it throughout his book. He goes, he's a very humble scientist. He's like, I don't understand why this is happening. It doesn't fit the theory that I'm sort of, molding into what I have observed. So he's a proper scientist, but people just, they get trigger happy and they try to mold authorities into what they want everyone to think and what they want to think here. So we have to watch that.
So what these two first things remind me of is the first permaculture principle is observe and interact. Before you start doing stuff, observe and interact. So if we're thinking about regenerative scenario planning,
I like that. Let me grab that.
We do some, and continually, maybe we're continually observing, right, and interacting.
But interacting maybe without disturbing, right? Because how can you observe
right.
something if
No.
you're actually
Well,
disturbing? Is that what you mean by
I don't
interact?
know. Well, interact. I think when I think of it, it means go outside when it's raining and see how the water flows. Go outside when the wind is blowing at different times of day, different times of year, and see where the wind comes from. Notice where the sun rises, where the sun sets. Notice what happens, and you're always, it's the first principle. So it's sort of, but you're never not doing it, right?
Yeah.
So if you're interacting, then you're also observing what happens from your interaction. So that's the first thing. And then the variability, when you talked about that, reminded me of I took a leading pro-social course this fall, and which is based on evolutionary biology combined with Eleanor Ostrom's Governing the Commons work. And so the idea of the more variable ways a group or you as a person, if you're living in a pro-social way, or a group that wants to live in a pro-social way, the more variables you can have to try, the more likely you are to move things forward, because a lot of things are going to fail.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll explore that more in this presentation too. So let's get into it a little bit. Good observations there. So we had laws of variation, natural selection, and everyone knows about Malthusian thinking and stuff like that, which is kind of nasty. I'm going to read through this because I think it's just fascinating and relevant. We shall, however, be enabled to discuss what circumstances are most favorable to valuation. I think it meant variation. I think that's a typo, almost 100%. In the next chapter, the struggle for existence amongst all organic beings throughout the world, which inevitably follows from their high geometric powers of increase, will be treated of. This is the doctrine of Malthus applied to the whole animal and vegetable kingdoms. As many more individuals of each species are born than can possibly survive, and as consequently there is a frequently recurring struggle for existence, it follows that any being, if it vary however slightly in any manner profitable to itself, under the complex and sometimes varying conditions of life, will have a better chance of surviving and thus be naturally selected. From the strong principle of inheritance, any selected variety will tend to propagate its new and modified form. So there's some profound implications there. Let's talk about inheritance carrying forward the success of the past, right? They're talking about competition, which is created by the very prolificness of nature itself, of life. Life, creates more of itself all the time. There's an exponential increase if there's no culling, so to speak, right? And the culling occurs naturally because in a finite environment with limited resources, the more creatures you have devouring those resources, the more competition there will be to get the last remaining resource in that area, right? And they're saying that this is what forces that natural selection of that one thing that is most fit to survive. What I find missing from this perspective, if I may critique Darwin, is that he wasn't thinking of the fact of the whole of nature, that this is for nature's benefit, not for man's benefit, or that organism that is dominant benefit at all. It's for all of nature. So there's a best fit for all of nature, best foot forward, so to speak, for that. And I'll talk about that further there.
And I want to keep interrupting because I don't really want to
Yeah, let's have a
lecture.
dialogue.
I want a dialogue.
As long as I can get through to the natural part, to nature's part.
Right. But it just helps me here. Because this is there's a lot here that would, but what comes to my mind again is the pro-social, leading pro-social, which, I think may be a method for scenario planning, like as it's occurring to me. Or could be. Anyway, the idea that, and this may be right where you're going, that individuals who compete, like the most will be like the most whatever individual, the most focused on self-interest between individuals will usually succeed. But groups that focus the most on cooperation will be most likely to succeed.
Yeah. Okay. And that's confirmed. That's a fact. I mean, there's no
evolutionary biology. That's part of the evolutionary biology.
Exactly. Good observation there.
David has a question. Is sense making regenerative scenario planning or part of it?
Yes. But who's doing the sensing is a question. Okay. And I have not answer for that, but I can talk to that too. So again, we not only have the external things going on, we have the internal things going on. Like there's internal patterns that are propagated forward through instinct. I think this is fascinating because there's an internal life for every living being, right? It's what tells them, that pattern that tells that organism what to do, how to be successful, the things to avoid, the things to eat, the things not to eat, all that, the sort of internal, I call it firmware programming. It's probably not hardware because that's just the physical natural selection, but there's natural selection that forms instinct as well. Okay? And they talk about, he just mentioned some examples, which is fascinating there. So that's something to keep in the back of our minds here.
And instinct is actually a result of natural selection, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also it's far more than killer instinct. The survival instinct includes nurturing. The nurturing instinct is just as strong in nature as the killer instinct, so to speak. So it's just that people just cherry pick, well, the patriarchy or whatever, the dominant aggressors in our world have cherry picked what they want to hear from this. Okay, so let's look at
David's got a comment.
I can't see the hands for some reason. Go ahead.
I'm just watching the chat. So another
well, and I'm just kind of sticking stuff in the chat too. Sorry, I don't really mean to interrupt, but I was part of that sense making is that I do wonder if humans have particular skills in this area, and part of our role, if you will, in natural systems is to use that kind of a role. It's our brain is part of what we bring to the table.
Right.
Yeah, the ability to see the whole and understand it. Yeah, I think it's a pretty rare thing. We have a massive neural net, and I'm going to talk to that. Stephen Harold Bruner talks to that directly too. But let's play some poker. And why do we play poker? All right. Well, mathematics is part of nature. This how nature works is through it leverages the principles of mathematics in order to get the job done. So let's get some insight into what that looks like here. Although this is absolutely ridiculously simplified, but it's the only way I know of actually looking into that. All right, let's play some poker. All right, this is kind of more of a complicated version of poker, but it's a type of poker that is transparent. You can see more of what's going on in poker than you can in what is it, 5-card stud or something like that, where everyone's like holding their hands really closely in front of them, so you have no idea what's going on. All right. So the idea is you want a high hand, right? And a high hand, like a pair is high, two pairs is higher. You can have a full house, which is like all these three the same and then two the same. Sometimes you can do sequences, but they all have to be in the same suit, or maybe they don't. There's all kinds of things which create a high hand. Okay, so the idea is to win over and have a better hand than your opponent. Now this looks really promising for this hand because wow, there's two aces here, and you don't have no idea what your opponent is. Likely that he doesn't have as good a hand as that as two aces, right? But maybe he has a king. Now, the cards in front here basically are supposed to match and sort of augment your hand. In 5-card draw, basically you have all 5 cards. But here, what they call the flop, it's on the deck. In front of everybody can see this, right? And they're laid out sequentially, and you bet every time someone lays out a card, right? Based on what you think your hand will be, right? So right now you have 2 aces and nothing really matches to make a hand with the flop, with what's outside there.
I don't see where you are, Dennis. I'm sorry.
Oh, what happened to my share? The share disappeared, strangely.
He clicked on a link to Chromatic up in,
Yeah, but there's no way that should have killed the share.
I
I'm
can
sharing
see the
again.
share.
I'm seeing it in the share.
Okay.
I see it in the share.
All right.
I don't see. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Michelle,
you lose
did you
your window?
accidentally click on the meeting button? There's a button on the very top line. You may have to click on Dennis Britton's screen of your Zoom window.
I'm following
Oh, because
him.
you're a host. Yeah.
I'm following you.
Okay, you're on the Miro board though. He's not using the Miro board. He's just in the Zoom window.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Sorry. Gotcha. Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, you were on my other monitor. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So let's see what happens here. So there's let's see. Okay, so okay, playing or folding is the most basic decision in poker. Should you continue to invest by betting or not? Now we're trying to imitate natural selection, right? We're like, hey, is this life form really making it, or do we need to change it somehow, right? Do we need to like compost it or something like that? I think that's the question nature might ask. So let's play. All right. But what do you win? Well, you win the more likelihood of survival, I guess. You get to continue to live, which is a nice thing. You don't get extinct.
You might get to reproduce.
Exactly. They're very good. All right. So what's the pot size? Here, they're just adding up the cards. Now, an ace is 11. All right. This is 10. This is 10, 4, and 11. So it's what? 22, 32, 42, 46, like they said there, right? That's the amount you can win if you win, right? Let's see. What is expected pot? With a random hand, so they're saying randomly you can expect $36. That's almost the same as a pot. So you're kind of 50-50, not 50-50 odds, but 50-50 odds of making any kind of money based on how much you spend on it. As you turn over the cards, this is key. You get more information. So the current pot will increase and the expected pot will recalculate. So it's almost as if like the parallel here is an organism is going through different challenging survival experiences, right? And each experience gives it information about like what will work, what won't work. Okay, let's see. So are there costs? Yes, of course. I mean, anytime you have an experience, it costs you energy, right? Or money or whatever. Like you go to Disneyland, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Each card has a cost. The more information you get, the higher the cost. So you see all the cards, you have to spend $20. $3 for these, $6 for what they call the turn, the fourth card, and then $10 for the fifth card. So as you get more information, the price goes up. Okay, let's play. Okay, we got $40. Let's see, we can play at least 4 hands, or 2 hands rather. We're going to keep track of the decisions, and we have to pay, even to see our own hand, we have to pay. Like to get to know what we can do. It's sort of like maybe a youth going through training or getting to know themselves, right? We're going to pay for that. So those are our cards. Wow, that's not really great. So what I'm going to do here, I'm making a decision to call this. Let's say this is like a microbial life form or something, and the odds of it succeeding are very low, right? So obviously the microorganism doesn't say, okay, I'll just commit suicide. Boom. No, nature chooses that. Nature says, oh, I've created something crappy that has very little survival on its own. I don't want it to consume any more of my resources. I'm going to kill it off and use it for compost. So I'm going to say, let's compost it, fold. Okay. All right. We still have a lot of money left because we only paid, was it $1? So we have $39. We can play and play and play. So there's a lot, the idea of multiple chances, of trying a lot of small bets, trying a lot of things. Nature is incredibly prolific. It creates a lot of experiences, a lot of chances for life. Let's just try this again, see what we got. 7 and 10. Still not great, but hey, we've got 2 spades here. So we could maybe get, although it's a pretty low probability, we'd probably get what they call a flush, which means all spades. So all I'd need is 3 cards with spades here, and I would win against pretty much anything the opponent would have. Okay, so I don't want to fold. I want to pay to see what these are and see what my chances are here. Okay, so I decided to pay the $3. Expected value is this. The cost is, finish the hand is $19. Bad decision. Oh, really? Okay, so this I would hope would be like nature telling me, like, what are you thinking? You know what? This is unusual because there's 2 actors going on, the computer and me. I'm just going to play. Okay, I still have a chance. So, although a really slim one that these 2 would be this. So I'm going to play stupid and I'm going to continue on. All right, my chances of winning are only 39%. This happens in nature too. Okay, I want to see more. I'm just burning my money. I'm still playing though. Okay, I lost. So I'm going to fold. I'm not going to pay the extra $10. There's absolutely no way I can win against what would like have no matches at all. So I'm going to fold. So nature does this too, where you have some really a lot of organisms that or species that are really consuming a lot, and yet it's allowed to grow because of the off chance that it might be something incredibly value for life itself. Okay, so I'm going to fold that. So let's start again. Oh, that's much better. Okay, with a fairly high hand. I'm going to pay the $3 to see. Oh, wow, 2 aces. That's an excellent hand. I would definitely continue. I can either go all in and spend all my bucks. In other words, this would be nature really supporting a very expensive life form like humans, right? Saying, hey, I have a lot of confidence in humans. They have this ability to sense the presencing and all that stuff. Let's go for it. It can be great for everybody if they behave, right? Or I can just say, well, let's just see what happens next. Right, sort of nature stringing us along, going like, oh, let's get them what they need and see if they actually turn the corner and actually be beneficial instead of just tearing apart nature itself.
What would be an example of going all in versus just taking the next, turning the next card?
It would be a huge investment of resources into that species.
Yeah, I wonder what would be an example of that.
It'd be other species dying to create life in this other species. That's literally what it'd be. It'd be other life forms dying in order to support this one life form. That's what that looks like. Okay. So
Really?
this didn't pan out well, maybe. So double ace is still good. Let's pay for you want to pay for the whole thing? What do you think, guys? I'm all, let's see what happens.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I won, or we won, right? So 2 aces beats, they don't have anything. The other hand is terrible, right? If there were 5 diamonds, that would be a great hand because it would beat it, but they didn't get 1 extra diamond. Kind of like I didn't get 5 spades before, so we won. So this is how it works. Let me move this forward a little bit, okay? Let's see, pay $1, see the difference is, so if I go all in, I have no idea what these cards are. I don't know if they're going to be successful. So I believe nature works in very small steps too. Doesn't like that. So I'm going to fold. No, I'm going to go play whatever. Ooh, 3 queens. That's huge. Wow. If I had folded, even when it didn't look great, I would have lost that money. And I'm almost sure to win. Three of a kind is a huge hand. So I could just go all in because I'm super confident. It doesn't really buy me anything because I'm still going to pay $16. It's quicker, right? So let's see what happens. Oh, I can't. Oh, I don't have enough money to keep going. Interesting. So this is why nature needs to compost life, because there's not unlimited resources. We're on a finite planet, right? You only get so many chances at bad. Nature does, right? So nature can be very conservative also. It can be extravagant and conservative depending on it. So this is what I see. So here we go. So here's the real world, and this is where it gets interesting. This is portfolio strategy. This is the game that nature plays. So we're going to play 10 hands all at once, right? And it's going to be a variety of, so there's 10 hands, right? Here it's just running it. So we're doing scenario planning, right? It's a simulation essentially is what it is, right? It didn't go too well. Okay, we can try again. Let's see, just to show that it's different. A lot of winning going on. Oh, losing. So let's see, very different result. They have something called a hurricane graph, which is fascinating. This shows the most likely outcome in green is right here. This is pure probability here over a large scale number of items. Less likely is yellow, very unlikely is orange, and then red is highly unlikely. Okay, average outcome $174, losing $25. That's the alternative. Metered funding strategy. Now this is where it gets interesting for how we can work the way nature works and the way mathematics works too. But most people don't do it this way. They do like big upfront funding all the time. Okay. In the first trial, you end up playing 35 hands because you folded a few times. The overall outcome wasn't great. Okay, so not great. Let's try again. Oh, it has to finish it. There it goes. A little bit better. You can see if you're really fast, you can actually see the hands as they go. Okay, wow. So that was really good. Second trial wound up playing 23 hands, folded a few times. Overall outcome much better. But we had
What did you
choice.
change in order to go from the lower one to the upper one?
Nothing.
Oh,
Exactly
okay.
the same circumstances, just different odds. Hands plays a huge role in survivability and in thrivability.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that. I think that's huge. Here's what it looks like, right? Most likely is right in the center here. So the outcome we had was either unlikely or even highly unlikely. Okay, but we locked out essentially. So comparing to all in, these are the two outcomes there. Average outcome of all in is $174, and the average outcome of metered funding is $204. That's a significant increase of survivability and economy of use of resources, right? This is why nature calls things all the time, in real time. Every single action that happens, every moment in nature, there's culling going on and composting going on. Like, is this worth supporting or not worth supporting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So would this compare to like, I mean, I want to hear more about how this, how this is being used for startups but it sounds to me like lots of small experiments that you can quickly adapt and pull back from, like, that you didn't even necessarily invest a lot in.
And that's this whole article is about
that
someone.
It's okay to that you expect you're going to lose a lot of that investment because so many of the experiments are not going to succeed.
Yeah.
Is that right? Am I getting it? Am I getting
absolutely.
that?
Yeah. Brad?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if you guys know Gitcoin. It's a quadratic funding. They get a pool of money and people propose projects and then they vote on how to allocate the dollars. And I was just looking at it, and it's a nice try, but it's kind of pitiful because everybody ends up with a few $100s instead of actually somebody ending up with enough money to do something, right? And so it seems like this is very relevant. Like, make a lot of, maybe that's where they're at, is they're making all the small bets now. And then, and can you talk about that? Like, how do you, especially resource allocation, is a really kind of critical thing that we need to do. And, it does seem like there's a lot of ideas about where to put resources, but how do we, kind of go from, how do we apply this to being good at it?
Yeah. This is what's cool about Silicon Valley is they have a lot of experience in this area, right? And some folks are really interested in like bootstrapping and lean startup and that kind of thing. This guy, Tristan Kromer, is one of the he's one of the smartest guys out there. and he has a very successful consulting practice. Like, I wouldn't say he does an incubator, but he trains people how to be better entrepreneurs and also how to be better investors, especially at the lower level of the seed investments and getting things going here, especially without a lot of big upfront corporate money, which is not very intelligent money, right? He's saying here also that different information is key, and making small bets is key, and adapting. The adaptability is the key part here. And this is just imitating what nature does, and we're part of nature, so we know how to adapt, and they're applying it to the financial strategy, so we're able to see it. And this is, and also be able to understand the mathematics behind it.
Yeah, and I think that venture money and investment has a lot of room to play, whereas a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do is either nonprofit, public benefit, that doesn't want venture investors, and so it's a lot trickier to, you're playing with smaller numbers, I guess, is what the issue is.
And even funders who are interested in funding projects, solutions, networks. I mean, there's still, like, how do we fund these things? How do we measure? What do we, how are we knowing? How do we, if it's conservation, because you bought some land, right, and put some easements on it. But if it's, a different kind of impact.
I am seeing a lot of interest in foundations and other funders solving that problem through innovation, right? So that if for instance, Global Regen Collab is a great, collection of minds, right? And if funders could get good, scenario planning, sorting, whatever, of their funding options, so that they reduce their transaction cost and increase the quality of the outcomes, I think they would definitely use new tools to do that. So I think this is very relevant to that process, right? Like if we can learn how to do that. I went through this with the Collaborative Technology Alliance. We got a $50,000 grant from I forget, one project or something, and then they trusted us to figure out how to allocate it. We haven't seen the outcome that they thought our process was good enough to increase the dollars, but that's the idea. Is like, if you can prove that you're good at allocating resources, then there'll be more to allocate.
Yeah, some of the funders are starting to work that way, which I really like. What I don't like is the sort of bake sale attitude, where they're funding companies with a few $1,000s, over several months. Like, what do you do? I mean, especially in the first world here in California. Well, I'm not sure what kind of world we're in, but some kind of strange world where people have a lot of money, right? You can't do anything with $5,000. You can't sneeze for that. So it should be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars as far as the small bets go. And no one's playing at that level that I've seen. I've researched it. I'm looking like it at what that. Yeah, no.
So let me say this though, and first I want to welcome Wonky Baloney. Hi.
Hey.
Welcome to, we're talking about what would regenerative scenario planning mean as a part of regenerative governance. So that's true for businesses, for maybe technical startups, for things like that. But in a neighborhood, like a historically Black neighborhood, where someone wanted to do an experiment with something to do with food security, $5,000-$10,000 could do a worthwhile experiment to say, what would it mean to start up a farmer's market? What would we learn? What would success look like? And then what would we learn? And sometimes that what would we learn is a success. Sorry, David, I talked right over you and I see your hand. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. I just wanted to, I mean, I've been trying to figure out, and Brad, you kind of provoked it, but I think there's something about the regenerative thinking that is different from efficiency thinking that we're traditionally quite good at. So what we try with a lot of business and our modeling is to be more efficient. But it does seem like there's an abundance notion in nature, quote, that we are undervaluing somehow. And that nature somehow ends up at efficient outcomes, but not necessarily by optimizing efficiency in the past, right? So I'm thinking of things like, you know, this tests where the banana slugs reproduce the map of London, you know, by whatever, and you know, so we get to kind of what we would think of as logical outcomes, but not necessarily through what we would have done with experimental methods. And I don't know what that means. I mean, it seems like efficiency has to matter, kind of. But one is it does, I think, decrease, an overemphasis on efficiency decreases resilience. So you see some impacts there.
Yeah.
And I just don't, you know, I think efficiency kind of implies a think ahead function that nature may not have without us. And so anyway, I'm just curious if efficiency is one of these, like, traditional scenario planning has an overemphasis on efficiency than whatever regenerative scenario planning is.
Agreed. Interesting observation and contrast between how humans are working in the reductionist perspective and how the investment perspective and how nature works. Nature defers culling till, okay, there's two ways nature culls, right? One is through the habitat. It restrictions the habitat. Like in a desert, you're probably not going to be growing I don't know what doesn't go, roses or something like, or maybe you do. I don't know, whatever plant doesn't do well and it needs a lot of water. You're not going to see ice plants in the desert probably, right? So it restricts the possibilities at the outcome. But those that overcome the possibilities, I believe that nature defers the culling until after it gains the most information about the utility of that organism, that being, right? How useful is it and beneficial is it to that environment? And I'm not talking about how we look at beneficial, it's how nature perceives that benefit, right? Is it increasing the level of life and thrivability of the entire ecosystem in that region, right? That's what I believe that nature looks at before it ends up culling things. Culling happens on the rear side, in the so-called future, right? But I mean, nature doesn't have a future and past, it just evolves, right? It moves forward. But it allows these multiple chances and invest, and then it calls after it gets the most information. Whereas humans tend to just make prejudiced decisions right off and not invest or call too soon, you know. So, I'm going to move off of the math and game theory and let you guys explore. There's some great info here. This is the whole portfolio of small bets. It's a fascinating, it's a thesis actually, a potential thesis he's got here, where the guy's talking about basically running your life through using this approach, this small bets approach to things. And he talks about generators and filters as well. Generators could be thought about as that abundance approach, abundance of ideas. And then the filters, like you can't pursue, you only have so much energy and time, so you have to filter out what you're going to pursue. Nature works the same way there. The other one to look at is real options. And there's a great video, I don't have time to, which basically talks about dealing with complexity and investments using essentially real options, which is essentially hedging your bets, going like, hey, I'm not sure if this is going to succeed or this or this. I'm going to mainly pursue this, but I'm going to keep bets in this and this other option, right? That's what that is. And he's pretty much an authority on real options. And folks are using this in corporate work to choose product management there. Okay, so that's on your own. You guys can research this. I'll leave this up for this. Wisdom of the crowd. I basically Googled that. I don't have too much on that. How wise are crowds? This is, again, a sampling technique using living beings to generate the diversity of opinion necessary to find out what direction might be going in, especially with social decisions there. So it's a sort of way of getting out of your own head. Now, this is okay.
So the wisdom of crowds makes me think about the experiments. You know, there's a lot of experiments going on in governance and societal governance, municipal governance, that's looking at technology and the wisdom of crowds. And I'm going to think of the name of the work in Taiwan, and I'll put the link in there. It's been really fascinating. Um, I wanted to go back to something Brad said in the chat though, real quick, because I thought it was
No.
worthwhile. I wanted to hear him talk a little bit more, and there's a little conversation there. You said seed production is often very inefficient. And then
Yeah, I
there's a
mean,
couple
it's
comments.
just an observation that, yeah, and then you make the great point,
Mhm.
Michelle, that seeds are good for, so if I'm a tree and I produce a ton of acorns, right? And only a small fraction of them germinate, well, I get something that, I get a result that, at least propagates my genes. But I also create an abundance that's useful for the whole ecosystem. And that isn't my intent as a tree to feed, blue jays, right?
You don't
But
know.
yeah,
Good
it's
point.
it's
Yeah,
just an
and I think squirrels.
observation that
I love squirrels as example too. With that, trees symbiotic with squirrels or vice versa, right? And they go and plant the seeds, and they forget 80% of the seeds they forget. They don't have no clue where it is, and they never retrieve them. Some of those germinate because they've been planted. They're
right.
like a little
Yeah,
farmers there. Isn't that just
yeah,
amazing? Yeah.
yeah.
We
So I
had
guess I was wrong in the sense that it's not inefficient. It's just you think that there's this huge overproduction of
It's
of
extravagant.
seeds, but yeah, it is.
It's
Well, now
abundance.
it also relates to Dave's point about abundance, right?
Mhm.
That there's a component of natural systems that isn't a scarcity. I mean, obviously things are scarce in a lot of cases, but yeah,
Yeah. Nikki,
that's
thanks, Brad. Yeah, Nikki.
I was just going to respond about the squirrel because we, on the property I was living on until last year, or no, actually 2023. So yeah, no, last year, the beginning of January is when I left. But anyway, we had squirrels and they kept eating the tangerines off of the neighbor's tree and then coming and bringing and bearing the seeds. So by the time we left, we had a bunch of citrus trees started growing because of the squirrels.
Ah, perfect. The little farmers. Awesome.
The
Yeah, I
other,
love squirrels.
I want to just do one more example of the abundance and the how it's just. So the other example is, to your point, something like 90% of what happens, what is born in a forest dies. So a lot of those acorns will sprout and they'll die. They'll get stomped on, something will happen, or lots of other things will sprout and die. And they'll make soil. That makes soil.
Mhm.
I am not speaking French. I'm speaking English. They'll make soil. Tree frogs, most of the frogs don't make it, but most of the frogs become food.
Mhm.
And then become soil. So coming back to regenerative planning, scenario planning regeneratively, and the yields that you're going to make, thinking about how many benefits, how many yields come from a particular effort that does not necessarily, like, it's just a redefinition of the return on investment.
Mhm. Mm.
And so you can't work if you can't eat. So, permaculture principle number 2 is return a yield, but there's more than but share the surplus is the third ethic of permaculture. You share.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
David.
David.
Well, and so two things. One is that I can't find the reference to the bananas tracking banana slugs to recreate the map kind of thing. I don't know if anybody else knows what I was talking about there, but I'm Googling around and I'm not finding it. So
I've
if you
heard of
find it,
that.
I'd love to see it.
Hmm.
I heard it
Maybe it
was
wasn't banana
ants. I heard
slugs.
ants did something along those lines, but
Yeah, I was just going to throw a link into the chat, but I can't find one. But the other thing I was wondering about is I do feel like, again, somewhere in here is the cool differences between what we've been doing and what we could be doing with regenerative stuff. And think the one that comes to mind is that, like, in the modeling we were just looking at, we were optimizing around, kind of return on a single variable, which, the squirrel isn't doing. The squirrel's trying to, feed themselves. I don't think the squirrel's got any intellectual processing, and I'm going to like grow a bunch of trees or feed a bunch of other animals. I mean, that's a byproduct, but it wasn't part of the intentional plan. And it wouldn't be captured by our financial modeling, right? Our financial modeling would be, we make money, we don't make money, right? And so
Right.
the difference is some concept of cascading benefits, right? That are the benefits that are created that we, are not directly intending, or I don't know, right? I mean, this is the thing about regenerative agriculture, is it does 6 things that are really great, right? Not just grow, efficient food. And how do we internalize the cascading benefits part into our scenario modeling?
Yes, internalizing that and
Okay.
becoming
One of the ways, and here's one clue from Stephen Harold Buhner, who is probably he's my favorite nature expert. I mean, I've read Rachel Carson and a lot of the others, and he speaks to me directly. So I'm going to read this because it's pretty incredible. Plant neurobiologists now understand that the root system of plants is a highly developed brain, much like our own, and uses the same neurochemicals as we do. Am I sharing this? Yeah. The people studying allelopathy, I assume that means communicating with plants, have found that plants are highly communicative, that they utilize chemical signaling to talk to all the other plants in the ecosystem they are in about what is going on. They send chemical words telling about a particular insect predator that might be eating them, make and then release compounds that will deter that insect or even call the exact predator of that insect to that location. They send all this information to all the other plants in the region. If other plants are sick, plants will make and release the compounds needed to heal them. Plant neurobiologists have found that the brain system of plants is extensive, that they have memory, plan for the future, teach new generations, are complex tool makers and users. Their chemical abilities far exceed our own, and have neural networks that in some instances far exceed our own.
So what do we know about how they plan for the future?
Yeah, he didn't get into that. There's an article that I'm linking to on here. If you click through on this sticky, it goes to that article. You're welcome to read it. I just did this morning, so I didn't have time to read the whole article. Hopefully he talks to that. His books are amazing. I've listened to one and I've read the other one. The secrets, something about the plants have secrets or something like that. So
that's amazing,
but yeah, so,
Dennis. Dennis,
yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I
Really
really
is.
like it. Maybe can I just offer one comment?
Please.
And it's this. I wonder if we're using the term plan as a human construct when in fact that word doesn't make sense in the context of nature. It's not a plan. It's responsive. It's a ever-present responding. So I'm just questioning the premise.
I love that. I agree. And that's what I came to the conclusion after this research for these 2 sessions, is that nature doesn't plan, nature is.
Yeah.
Nature's plan is existence in itself at every moment, and it's in constant communication, adapting. It's making micro bets, small bets every moment, and communicating constantly. It has perfect knowledge. You remember how we had to pay money to know? Nature pays money all the time. Its ability to communicate is incredibly efficient. And you know how Stephen Harold Buhner talked about how its ability to manipulate chemicals far exceeds our own, right? They release compounds, these kind of things. They're just better chemists than we are, right? They just use that. That's their way of expressing. And their brain, they say, he mentioned in this article later, is that if you look at the root system of like a tree or plants, it mirrors the neural networks we have in our brain.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And this is an amazing statement here. The thing to keep in mind is that our brains are not the point. It is a neural network that our brains hold that is the essence. The brain is merely the organ that holds the neural network. Take it out of the brain and it is identical in appearance and function to the root system of plants. And while our neural net is limited by the size of our skulls, the neural network of plants held in soil is not limited at all. Some aspen root systems are over 100,000 years old and cover hundreds of acres. Think about that. Hundreds of acres of a neural net. What would that be like?
There's I guess it's Utah or something. I forget the name of the aspen planting, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not one tree. It's like a whole, I mean, it is one tree and it's the largest sort of organic.
Largest organism on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And, thank you.
So at 11:56, we're getting to this. Oh, wait, Nikki, you go, babe.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to share that for the past week, I've been a part of an emergency, like a community emergency response team. That's how I met Wanchi, who runs a company called Regenerate Green. So obviously I invited him in.
Oh.
But I noticed, okay, so let me say this. When you were talking about how nature might be planning or moving resources, one of the ways this happens in forests is when a seed or whatever falls to the ground, as soon as it has enough water to sprout, the mycelial network communicates with the mother tree, and the mother tree actually moves her roots, one of her roots, to surround the seedling until it's strong enough to live on its own. And the mycelial network is giving varied amounts of nutrients and so forth to that seed during its development and growth to give it the best chance to survive. And so those resources will vary in amounts depending on which nutrients the mycelial network knows that it needs in that moment, what it's lacking, or don't give it more of this, or it'll make it toxic and it won't survive, etc. And I was thinking about that all this week while myself and hundreds of other people have been moving resources all over the county and directing, everything from meals to people just direct paying for hotel costs. I'm one of the people that has benefited from, being evacuated and having my room covered in a hotel right now by various people. And someone's coming in a little bit to bring me more meals and so forth. So there's a lot of things happening. And I think that if you look at community emergency response teams, that'll give you a closer indication of what's happening in the soil. Because one more thing I left out, the ants in the soil move those seeds to where they know it'll be most viable to sprout. So, we've got all kinds of things happening. The squirrel plants the seed, the ants move it to the most viable location. The mycelial network connects with its mom and is like, okay, you doing okay? Because like now you got to move your root to protect this thing and swaddle it. And then, all of these things. But yeah, we've been doing a lot here in Los Angeles, literally around the clock for firefighters, for victims, for evacuees, for all sorts of things, animals, like moving all the agricultural animals, horses, etc., wildlife. It's been really profound and overwhelming, but it did bring me back to the thought of the seeds in the forest and how they grow and what happens. And by the way, fire is one of the most common ways that pines get born, because that's when the pine cones burst and the seeds come out.
Yeah, that's true in the eastern part of the country as well. Nikki, I forgot that you are in Los Angeles and I did not check on you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Would be happy to make space. I hope you've got plenty, space for sharing what's going on. Thank you, Lynn. And Nikki, I've definitely been thinking about you because I just came through, Hurricane Helene, and that community response, that on the ground grassroots response is so fascinating, so full of mutual aid and cooperativism,
It's
so
wild.
full of even joy in the space of the horror because of the ability to interact and care for each other mutually and provide.
We're proving that community response, mostly run by this group, is mostly run by stay-at-home moms and gay men. And literally, we are proving, and it's being acknowledged by politicians, that we are far more efficient than the government is right now.
Yeah. Similar things happened here. There's a great book called by Rebecca Solnit that I'm in the middle of reading, called A Paradise Built in Hell. And it's a reporting of 5 disasters, starting with the earthquake and fires in San Francisco in 1906.
Yeah.
Ending in Katrina. I haven't gotten to Katrina yet. But I recommend, when you have a space and time, to do a little book club around that. Because it is true, like, and then the question becomes, what are the conditions that make it true in the face of catastrophe? And then once things have settled, what changes? One of the things I've read so far, and I'm not all the way through the book, has to do with, we're all just in the present moment, we're all in the same boat, and we're all just working on what's happening right now. And so when we start to think about the future, we start to think about what's going to advantage me and my family, me and my group, me and, what's going to advantage me. And and then once state services come in, how does that break up that mutual aid and cooperativism, and how can we have that abundant, that those resources not interrupt what's happening, and in fact maybe even strengthen it over time. I think is such a great slime railroad transport. Thank you.
Actually, Nikki and Michelle, check out Living Infrastructure. I don't know if you guys know David McConville and Don Danby, but they've been working for LA for several years on systems, and what they've built is sort of an emergent network of who has what resources and how to find them, and they're great people, and I just got that from him because we were in another conversation about what's going on in LA.
Yeah. We might, once things settle down a little bit, Nikki, and you're a little more safer at some point, really, this call would be a great, that's a great topic for this call. How are things being managed and handled, and how's communication handled, and what can make it easier? And, we didn't have internet, power, water. So,
well, that's happening
things to
here
observe about
too.
that. What's that, Nikki?
They cut off power for days, and then we lost most of the cell towers were hijacked for emergency response. So like there was a point in time where there was one grocery store in Calabasas, which was where we got evacuated from, that literally there was one grocery store that had satellite internet and a generator, and the entire community was packed into that Albertsons, just trying to get signal and find a way out where they're going next during the evacuation and everything, because otherwise we didn't have power for 2 days. Yeah.
Well, we got to close this call. Great question, David. Love to have that, if David McConville. Why don't you join us again? Perhaps we'll see you in the office hours at some point. Love to hear what you're learning about the coordination and the collaboration and the systems and practices that are supporting that.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, guys.
Dennis, thank you so
guys.
much for all this preparation.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis.
There's so much to think about, and I'm glad to have this to return to be thinking. And I think where we got was like, nature doesn't really plan, nature experiments, right? Nature invests, tries things, moves forward. but has a big vision, like has a vision towards life, right? Has a vision towards increasing for everything that's successful, and and then for just a system of life. So
Yeah.
how would we govern a business like that?
Yeah.
What would be the
Yeah.
different purposes? I mean, these are things we kind of already.
Maybe that's the next call is like, what does that look like? I think Stephen Herod Bruner talks about we are merely one part of a very large living scenario. There's only one scenario for nature, and that's life.
life.
By the way, I'll say one last thing before
Uh-huh.
you turn this off. There is actually a presence, probably about 10 to 15% of the people in the emergency response teams are international, sending resources over from like, just all kinds of resources over. So for us, it's international. I don't know if it was like that with Asheville, but we've got like, clothing brands from Europe and so forth that have sent massive amounts of support. One of them from Sweden. We've had people from France. Like it's really wild right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild. There's a lot, and there's a whole disaster economy. Like there's whole bunches of nonprofits that are just like sending teams and raising money to send teams, and that's
Yeah.
what they do. It's complex. It's interesting. It's interesting how, whether or not that's regenerative, our typical response to disaster. I mean, we have a whole lot of plastic bottles to deal with here in Asheville now, Western North Carolina.
Yeah.
All
Secondary
right, peace,
effects.
everybody.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.